Imagine waking up 50,000 years ago. You're thirsty, really thirsty. You look around, no bottle, no tap, no supermarket, no clean drinking water anywhere in sight. And there's one problem you can't ignore. If you don't find water soon, you die. So how did ancient humans survive without clean drinking water? The answer is actually more interesting than you might think. Ancient humans didn't simply walk around drinking from whatever puddle they found. They had to become extremely good at finding water, because water was everywhere, but usable water was not. A river could be contaminated. A muddy puddle could contain dangerous organisms. A small pool could disappear completely during a dry season. And sometimes the closest water source could be several kilometers away. So how did they find it? They learned to pay attention to the environment. Animals were one of the biggest clues. If you were walking through a dry landscape and suddenly noticed birds repeatedly flying in the same direction, that could be a clue. If you saw groups of animals gathering somewhere, there was a good chance water was nearby. Animal tracks could also reveal where creatures were traveling regularly. And if many different animals were heading toward the same area, following them could lead you to water. Ancient humans also learned to recognize the landscape itself. Low areas, valleys, riverbeds, natural depressions in the ground, places where rainwater collected. Even plants could provide clues. Certain vegetation grows where moisture is available. So instead of wandering randomly through the wilderness, humans could use the environment like a giant map. But finding water was only half the problem. What happened when the water wasn't exactly clean? Well, ancient humans obviously didn't have modern water filters. They couldn't walk into a store and buy bottled water. They couldn't test water for bacteria, and they couldn't see microscopic parasites floating around. So they had to rely on what was available. They could collect water from relatively clean natural sources. Fresh flowing water was often preferable to stagnant pools. Rain was another valuable source. And in some environments, people could collect water from plants or other natural sources. But here's something important. Not every ancient human had the same options. Humans lived in deserts, forests, mountains, grasslands, and extremely cold environments. Their solutions depended heavily on where they lived. Someone living near a large river had completely different problems from someone living in a dry desert. And desert survival could become especially difficult. Imagine walking through a hot landscape. The sun is beating down. Your body is losing water through sweat. You keep walking, but you can't see a river anywhere. At that point, finding water isn't just uncomfortable, it's an emergency. This is why knowledge became so valuable. A person who knew where a hidden water source was could potentially save an entire group. And that knowledge could be passed from one generation to another. Children could learn which valleys held water, which plants indicated moisture, which paths animals followed, where rainwater collected after storms, and where water could still be found during dry periods. In other words, humans didn't just survive because they were strong. They survived because they remembered. But there was another trick that became extremely important. Humans could carry water. Once people had containers made from things available in their environment, they didn't always have to drink immediately at the water source. They could collect water, carry it, and bring it back to the group. Containers could be made from materials such as animal skins, plant materials, wood, shells, or other naturally available objects, depending on the culture and environment. That changed the problem completely. Instead of constantly searching for water, you could make a water source last longer. But there was still one huge danger: dehydration. Your body can survive without food for much longer than it can survive without water. When you're losing more water than you're taking in, your body starts struggling. You become thirsty, weak, dizzy, confused, and eventually severe dehydration can become fatal. For ancient humans traveling through hot environments, this could happen surprisingly quickly. So water wasn't just something they drank when they felt like it. It influenced where they traveled, where they camped, where they hunted, and eventually where they lived. Think about that. A river isn't just a river. For an ancient human group, it could be food, water, transportation, animals, plants, and a place to return to again and again. That's one reason water sources became incredibly important locations for human life. But there's something even more surprising. Ancient humans weren't necessarily drinking perfectly clean water all the time. And we shouldn't imagine that every group had some secret ancient purification system. They were exposed to many of the same biological dangers that humans face from contaminated water. Some people undoubtedly became sick. Some recovered, and some didn't. There was no guarantee. Their survival came from a combination of environmental knowledge, experience, behavior, and sometimes simply having access to a safer water source. And over thousands of years, humans became better at controlling water. We learned to collect it, store it, move it, and eventually, much later, build systems that could bring water directly to where people lived. But it all started with a very simple problem. A human gets thirsty, looks across a huge landscape, and has to figure out where the water is. No map, no GPS, no bottle, no tap, just the land, the animals, and thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. So the next time you turn on a faucet and water instantly comes out, remember how strange that would have looked to an ancient human? For us, clean water is something we expect. For them, finding water could be the difference between life and death.